Hello, everybody. This is going to be a video response to a friend of mine who posted something on X. His name is George Parnes. He asked a question that I'd like to answer in kind of my own way because I think that it's actually a good topic of conversation, a good question. He said, "Can Gynarchy come from democracy?" And then he, of course, I'm going to read the rest of the comment just because I want to show some respect. Will males vote themselves out of power? No. And even if some become enlightened, there are still many women willing to become handmaidens to the patriarchy. Just thinking out loud. Thank you. Okay. So, can Gynarchy come from democracy? No. But my reasoning for this is different. The first is that this is an academic question. Our institutions are collapsing. Just listen to any competent climate scientist talking about it. We don't have hundreds of years. We may not even have more than a few decades. Are we really in a position where we can transition so quickly in that amount of time? That seems to be a rather unrealistic expectation, especially when we're having trouble forming communities. If we can't even form communities, how the hell are we going to transition a government at the national level? It just seems to me like that's an impossibility now. But the second reason why, if the other, there are actually a bunch of reasons. That's the first one. The second one is that there's no consistency in Democrat. And if we're talking about this as an institution, we're not just talking about values, like just democratic values or ideas, but let's just say this is an institution. Okay. A representative republic, does it actually, first of all, can it represent everybody? No. There are people who literally don't feel like they're represented by either Democrats or Republicans. So that's a big problem. Always has been. It's probably was going to be until the system collapses. So if one party is trying to move forward on a certain issue or make progress in their own way or trying to enact their own goal, and then you have another party that is not only fighting them, but is trying to pull them backwards and say, no, 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 we're not doing this, or try to reverse the progress. Well, what we have right here is inconsistency. And we have seen that with this system for hundreds of years, actually. It's like we got one party saying one thing. We have another party saying something completely different. And so we have this pulling back and forth, back and forth. It's not going anywhere. We're not seeing any kind of consistency. What we are seeing is the exact opposite. We're seeing every 48 years, we don't know what the fuck we're in for. And if we look historically, there is no expectation that we're going to have one party win indefinitely for the rest of our lifetimes. Even if they try to create an authoritarian regime, that doesn't change anything. People are still going to believe what they're going to believe. They're going to try to shape their personal environment with their beliefs. And eventually, these authoritarian regimes do collapse. They have a tendency not to last. They cause too many problems for people. So that's kind of how I look at it. I look at it like, if you can't even make up your mind, how the hell are we going to get from point A to point B? Like, it's that simple. If the voters can't even make up their mind, why should we expect anything different? Why should we expect voters to suddenly magically get on the same page and figure it out when they aren't getting on the same page and they aren't figuring this shit out? So that's a major problem. I also think that there's something else that is, it's sort of deeper at the center of this. Another reason why these institutions don't work is because of the people, one of the people who occupy the institutions. It's the religion. Their religion has beliefs that come into conflict with the living words of the document. In other words, the Constitution advocates for specific things that books like the Quran do not. So when you have a conflict like this, that's where theocracy rears its ugly head. Where people are like, well, you know what? I don't want this. Like, how can you possibly have a religion, have a country that is dominated in part by people who have that kind of thinking and not expect that to poison the institution itself? You can't. It's impossible. The representative republic will be destroyed as an institution by individuals who feel that those words, that those ideas are incompatible with the ones they hold to be true and valued. So hold to be true and which they value. I think a better question to ask the Gynarchy community is, can Gynarchy come from a non-religious society? Now, my answer to this question is yes. In fact, I'm going to do an entire video on it. But if you don't believe it, look at Japan. Look at how much femdom they have in the anime and manga industry. It's unbelievable compared to the West. Like, if you compare the amount of femdom moments that the West has to the amount of femdom content that Japan has, we're not even in the same ballpark. We're not even in the same stadium. We're not even on the same planet. It's on another level. So that's another issue. But I think that there's a deeper problem here concerning, and this is another reason, is, are these institutions as they exist today really going to be able to resolve conflict within our own community? Because for hundreds of years, it's kind of like this, right? So let's say you have 50 people in a room, and 26 of them have decided, hey, I don't really want to, we don't want to do this, we want to do that instead. And the other 24 are like, oh, fuck, we got outvoted. The only problem is there have been historical instances of this happening where minority groups get into control and they actually bully majorities through violence and other brutal tactics and strategies. This is actually a really fascinating thing. And it's part of the problem with I think democracy itself, which is, can 26 voters enforce their will on 24? And what we have seen, if you have read history, is no. You can't always enforce that. And part of the reason is because it's something back to what Sun Tzu said. If you've ever read The Art of War, he said that numbers alone did not confer any advantage. And what he meant by that is something akin to this, which is, if the 24 having the initiative decide that they don't want to go along with what these 26 are doing, they can kill them off, or at least reduce their numbers enough to where they become the new majority. You know, that group is like, no. Let's kill about, like, think about how easy it would be to establish majority, right? So let's say they decide, okay, well, I don't like this guy or this person, but this one's too dangerous to kill, or this one problem. So who do? They have little accidental deaths and they start killing certain individuals. They don't have to go after everybody, is my point. They don't need to kill everyone to establish dominance over that other group. They just need to kill a certain number of people so that they can outvote the other group. So I think the issue with like democracy and representative republic is, I think that when democracy is reduced to like two parties, that's when your representative republic is on death's door. So I think another question might be, is there a balance that can be found for, like, say, a femocracy or for a Gynarchist society? Can it adhere to democratic principles in a way that is properly balanced, or at least as balanced as it's going to be? Here's what I mean by balance. Balance is like where you don't have so few political parties that the environment becomes so polarized and violent. And on the other hand, you don't want to have too many political parties to where there's no real cooperation and nothing is getting done. So there has to be this kind of balance between you need to pass legislation, you need to get things finished, but at the same time, you don't want to consolidate power in so few people's hands that all one party really has to do is subjugate the other in order to control the country. So, I think that part of that solution could involve having multiple political parties that have many different values so that people can feel represented and they don't all have to put their money in one particular group or opt out of the system entirely. And I think that's part of the problem in the United States is I think a lot of people opt out of the system because they either feel that it's compromised in some way, shape, or form, or they don't feel like there's a party for them. Like, for example, what if somebody believes that no one should ban guns and also believes that a woman should have a right to choose? Where does that person, how is that person supposed to, where's that person's party? What about the person, here's another example. What about a person who opposes all kinds of abortion and yet wants to support social programs, right? What kind of, where are those individuals? Where's that party that says, okay, we're against abortion, but we support the social programs like Social Security, welfare, whatever, that'll help people who are in poverty and struggling. You see what I'm talking about? Do you get what I'm saying, George? That's the issue. The issue is that they're like political beliefs. People have been forced into two boxes, and that inherently creates tension and conflict. And then frustration leads to separating from the system, which is what I feel like the majority of Americans have done. And so if you want to have a strong, healthy, representative republic, you can't just have two of these groups monopolizing the affairs of a country. On the other hand, you can't have something like 50, 60, 100. There has to be a point at which you say, okay, enough is enough. We have 10, 12, whatever. And then to distribute that power more carefully among them so that it lessens the chance of a consolidation of power by a particular group. Now, is it perfect? No, it's definitely not. But unlike men, among women, I think that this kind of a balancing act would be better maintained by them, because women are less violent than men. It's just a fact. But I think, at least if you look at crime statistics, so people can they can choose whatever system they want. But I think that this kind of thing, I think that ultimately the problem is I don't think that these institutions can ever really bring about Gynarchy, because I feel like to some extent the very principles that are involved in a Gynarchy are also antithetical to a representative republic. I think that they are more suited for a community, not necessarily for politics on a level that goes beyond the community. But if Gynarchy were to be given a chance, like what would make it receptive towards it? First, you would have to actually have a system where you could trust that those politicians would not be compromised in any way, would not sell you out. And right now, Gynarchists are a super minority. So they've got to win elections. They've got to make their money. They've got to do their stuff. And if they can just like use you and then throw you away easily, then you're not going to be represented by that system. So it's kind of a question of how would we achieve representation anyways in such a system where many different people's beliefs have already been marginalized or excluded. I do think that's a problem. I'll have a part two ready.